Hey everybody, it's Scott Sandlin here with another conversation with another Hypno Thoughts Live presenter. You can see him next to me, but he and I are just going to have a real great conversation like we've been doing. And as many of you know, this is an unscripted, sincere chat. It's not an interview. It's just two people who like hypnosis, who respect each other, talking to each other and getting to know each other so that you can get to know us better too. So the guy I'm interviewing today, in my mind, came on the scene maybe 10 years ago or less, and has, from an American point of view, and I'm going to ask him about this, but has really done an amazing job in Europe, has done a really cool thing with preserving an important legacy in the OMNI hypnosis training, and has really kind of taken a torch and run with it in a great way. And so I'm interviewing today, obviously, Hansruedi J. Hans, how are you?
Oh, I'm very busy, but I'm doing excellent because it's a very, very special year for us. But first of all, thanks very much, Scott, for having me. And I also very much appreciate OMNI and myself being able to present at HypnoThoughts.
Of course. Yeah. We're glad to have you, and we'll talk about the conference in a second, but you just said it's an important year for you guys. And I just saw this on Facebook as I was reaching out to you about this. You guys are at 40 years.
Yes. It's not that my company has been around for 40 years. My company has been around for 10 years, or actually, well, a little bit more. But OMNI as a brand has been around since 1979 when Kein founded the company.
Jerry, to many of us, has got to be one of the most important hypnosis instructors of the 20th century, right? I mean, just in terms of the number of people he trained, it's a huge legacy that he has, and a legacy of really high quality graduates. Where do you put, and maybe you're biased, but where do you put, Gerald Kein on sort of that list of, the greats who've passed?
Oh boy. He probably is among the top 3 worldwide.
Sure.
Who ever lived, in my personal opinion. Whereas I think he's definitely ahead of one guy. I'm not going to name him.
I really wish you would, but I'm not going to press you.
But as I'm coming from the lineage of Gerald Kein, and he comes from the line of Dave Ellman.
Sure.
We all are standing on the shoulders of those who have done the work before us. And I'm very, very grateful that Jerry continued the work of Dave Ellman, and I'm very honored to be able to continue the work of Gerald Kein. But I wouldn't be nowhere near where I am today, where my students are today, if we hadn't had Gerald Kein keeping the legacy of Dave Ellman alive, and obviously fine-tuning everything, adding ultra height and all those other things that made him so unforgettable. I mean, he was a living legend who passed away 2 years ago, unfortunately.
He was a living legend, and he was an approachable one, right? Like, he was a good, as much as he was an important figure in our profession, and he obviously was, he was also a good dude, right? Like, you could just talk with him and laugh with him. And I think that he did a really good job of making that a priority in terms of just him as a human being, and enjoying his role in the profession, and having other people enjoy their interactions with him. And you obviously knew him way better than I did. I met him, a bunch of times, and had the pleasure of talking with him about a bunch of things. But I mean, you worked side by side with him for a few years. Behind the scenes, how thoughtful was he about the long-term, sort of the long tail of his legacy? How thoughtful was he about all that?
Well, you said he was always approachable, and that's so true. He never took himself too seriously. He was able to laugh about himself. And he always said he never bought his own marketing. So he never took himself too seriously, and he always remained approachable. And even when I was living at his house, or he was living at my house here in Switzerland, he was the same guy that you would know in the classes, and obviously we had a lot of private talks and everything. And I learned a lot from him, and he prepared me to manage the business by myself. I think he was aware of his role in the history, and one of the things he said, I remember, that it was definitely him who kept Dave Ellman alive in the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
And only once internet came around, Ellman started spreading again. And of course, he has the number of students, the sheer number of students, and they're estimated around 10,000 that he has trained. That is amazing. And he just felt, obviously, by people, the care they had for him, the love they had for him. You know, he could get away with jokes that I would be arrested.
Yeah. Yeah, that's completely true.
And for his kind of humor, but he had a great love for the human being. If you listen to his live sessions, if you watched him work, there was love for the human being, for bettering the human being. And he also told me, listen, if you're only getting into the business to keep doing what I have been doing, what Ellman has been doing, get out of the business. You're the wrong person.
Right.
Take what we have taken, take what we have given you, and build on that and make it better. Take it further. And that has always been my personal challenge as well. And I keep addressing that to my students. If you only take that, what I'm teaching you, get out of the business.
Right.
Challenge it. Make it better. Make it wider, bigger, higher, deeper, whatever. So, yeah, he was aware of his importance, but he never played that card.
So thinking about his legacy, you know, a big, and you know, just sort of OMNI, you know, there's, and this is actually just something I'm curious about, that, you know, I was introduced to Jerry because of VHS tapes, right? I think a lot of people were. You know, he had these packs of VHS tapes in like the 90s that you could like mail order. And he was, you know, there was that kind of small little room he was teaching in, and he just had a camera on a tripod on the back of the room, and then he would just send out those classes. And I learned the Ellman induction that way. I learned rapid inductions in part that way, and other stuff, you know, regression and things like that. How much of all that footage got transferred over to digital, or did anything just not make that leap?
Funny you would mention those VHS tapes. I got my first ones, I think it was in '98 when I was living in Brazil.
Okay.
I got them in the mail, but I was still very focused on my career in the automotive industry and doing my race car driving in Brazil. So I watched the videos, but, you know, to be quite honest, I didn't check it at what kind of a diamond I was holding in my hands. It would take a little bit longer. It would take a few more years until I really realized what a gem that thing was.
Sure.
And all those videos, all those VHS videos have been transferred to DVDs later, and they all have been transferred to digital downloads or digital files, MP4s,
right,
etc. So when I was in his house, every time I had like 30 kilos, I guess that's about 90 pounds of books and videos and DVDs that I shipped home to Switzerland. At one point, I think it was close to 60 kilos. So I have unpublished books of not him, but other big names in the industry that were sent to him just to ask, what do you think? There are gems in those things. There's videos, there's all those things he cut out of those videos because they were politically not correct. But it would take years to dive into all that stuff and understand what is left. So, but we need to bring OMNI forward. But I guess what is available today is probably 95% of whatever has been really recorded.
That's cool. So you just said something that is, when I think of you, one of the free association just thoughts that comes into my head is race cars.
Yes.
And when I first heard of you, one of the first stories I ever heard about you, long before we actually met or spoke, was a story. Tell me if this is true. Did you actually drive a race car into a hypnosis conference in Europe? Does this happen?
Yes, this is true. Sean Michael Andrews was in Switzerland and teaching a 2-hour presentation on instant inductions.
Okay.
And he has that claim to fame, being that he's the world's fastest hypnotist.
Right.
And I said, screw that. I said, I'm going to challenge him on that. So I called up a friend who has race cars, and I rented that race car. I got my old suit on, my balaclava, my helmet, my gloves, and then I prepared the car outside of that seminar room, that presentation room. Uh-huh. And when Sean was about to finish his presentation, 2 guys got up, opened those big wing doors, and I revved up the engine, and I drove right into the room. And he jumped out of the way because he thought if I let the clutch go, he's dead meat.
Right.
And then I really revved it, placed the car right in the middle, got out in my whole suit, took my yes, exactly, my helmet, got my gloves, and threw them on the floor. And I challenged him to say, to prove who is the truly fastest hypnotist.
See, that's cool. Like that, and I'm sure Sean had a sense of humor about that. I mean, that's a fun thing.
Oh, he better. I wasn't out. My foot wasn't the accelerator.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Sean's not a big guy, but I'm pretty sure he's going to lose a fight to a car. So race car driving. I've had a couple clients that are race car drivers over the years. When you were driving, were you doing like open wheel or GT or what were you up to?
Well, you would call it NASCAR in the U.S.
Okay.
And it's called stock car, but it has nothing to do with the stock car in the U.S.
Right.
It is like NASCAR, but it's more Formula One circuits. There's 1 or 2 tracks that are ovals, and the rest is all like in São Paulo, Interlagos, Rio, and other places where we had our races.
Like here, we've got like Laguna Seca and things like that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
You're driving for a factory, so you're driving like a Mercedes, but it's obviously a souped-up race car for Mercedes or that kind of thing.
Yes, I was a private racer.
Okay.
And I had my own budget, and I was driving a Chevy actually.
Oh, cool. Okay. A client of mine does that, and he drove in Italy for a while, and he did that kind of thing, and then he ended up switching over to F1. For a while. And it's fun talking to him about the difference between more of a stock car versus the open wheel and just the physics of the cars.
Hardly any comparison because you got barely any weight, and those big NASCAR cars compared to Formula cars are heavy. Yeah. And there's incredible acceleration. I once tested a Formula One in France, and I mean, it's like as if a horse kicks you right in the chest when you switch gears. Unbelievable acceleration. So
my client was driving for McLaren and then switched to an F1, and he said, McLaren, that's a real car. That's a heck of a race car. And then to switch to the Formula One, he said it was like getting slingshotted off like off an aircraft carrier.
It is unbelievable, the acceleration and also the braking power.
Yeah.
And once there was an article published here in Switzerland, the way he used to drive cars, he now hypnotizes. Basically, always full power at full speed, attacking the problem and solving the problem. And I always said, the second place is the first loser.
Sure.
When I get into a therapy or when I teach, I want to be the winner for the client, for the student. Mm-hmm. And only then I really have won. Right. So that's my philosophy. And, I'm coming from the automotive industry. I worked many years for Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, in Brazil, in Turkey, in the US with Freightliner, by the way. And having that goal and result-oriented approach from the industry and this elite sports attitude, winning is in my genes, I guess. And winning is an attitude that I have when I do therapy. I want to win. And winning means I want to have the client happy, go out of there after 1 or 2 sessions and say, the problem is solved. And the same thing with my students. I always tell them, you guys are my business card out there. If you perform well, if you guys perform well, you're my best marketing. And the more success you guys have, the more success I have. So I'm very success and result and goal oriented in my approaches.
So let me ask you about race car driving, because, you know, like I said, I've talked to a few race car drivers over the years. And I've got a friend who does a lot of track time and things like that, you know, recreationally. But listening to different drivers and how they approach it, some guys approach it with a lot of homework, right? You know, they walk the track, they're looking at break points, you know, on a map, and they're figuring out, you know, camber and all the details of it. And then there are some guys that are much more reactive and in the moment and thinking less about the course and thinking more about the other cars. How did you approach race car driving?
I actually got to it fairly late. I was convinced. I was doing parachuting back then when a friend approached me and said, "Hey, why don't we take a racing class?" And I said, "Well, that's dangerous." And he said, "Well, parachuting is dangerous." And I said, "Yeah, but I've always got a reserve, you know."
Right.
So, but I went on the track, and already on my first 2 or 3 laps, I was doing laps around my friend. And the guy said, "Well, you've got some special talent." And then one guy approached me and said, "Listen, you want to join the team?" And that were all in the same day.
Wow.
And a week later, I met somebody from Mobil Oil, and I talked to him, and he gave me money, and then another company gave me money, and boom, there was the racing team. It was kind of out of the blue.
That's incredible.
So yeah, it was really lucky, I guess.
Yeah,
And
because getting those sponsorships, you know, getting that funding, I mean, it's an expensive endeavor.
yes, but
I
I
mean,
guess I just got lucky.
Just the tires you're burning on a weekend, you know, you're talking about thousands of bucks.
Yeah. Well, I was also the first one to get some help by Red Bull in Brazil.
Oh, cool.
Before they started really getting into racing sports, I knew the importer of Red Bull.
Okay.
And so he helped me out a little bit privately, basically, but we had, you know, Red Bull stuff on a very discreet base.
Yep.
I was obviously I was learning by looking at the others.
Okay.
So we were racing together with also the Formula guys were there. We're not the same time on the track because that would be dangerous. We were slower.
Right.
But you could learn a lot from just watching. So all these little technical details didn't bother me. We were basically 20 to 30 cars. Once you put that helmet on and put the visor down, there were, excuse my French, 30 assholes racing to be the first for that very first curve. So, you know, it didn't matter much. It was left and right bump, and, you know, it was very physical, actually. I had to learn a lot. In the first season, I was still overtaken, or how do you say?
Passed.
Passed or lapped.
Yep.
I was lapped by the front cars. The second season, less, but still. And in the third season, I was able to stay in the same round, which was, you know, for a private guy who got out. Those people, they learned racing with 8, 10, 12 years old. And I mean, they're Brazilians. I mean, there was Felipe Massa was in that racing circuit there.
Right.
Barrichello was there. All those guys were around in the formulas, not in the stock car part.
Right.
But so I had great idols, former Formula One race car drivers from Brazil were there. I mean, it was an elite of the elite racing those races, and I was just amazed, and I was learning by just watching. And
yeah. Oh, that's cool.
I had my crashes, and of
course,
my curve, some bends named after me, you know. But yeah, it's something that I certainly dearly miss sometimes. But, you know, this is just as much fun as well.
Yeah, you know, like just talking to people I know who are into it. I mean, it's interesting to try to find a different place that's going to give you that same level of needing to be present, right? Like you have to be so 100% in the moment doing that it's that as much as it is anything else that really is addictive, I think, for people.
You better be focused.
Yeah.
Whilst you race, because whilst I was racing, we had 2 people who died in accidents. Yeah. So you better be present. I mean, don't think about, you know, I don't know, your girlfriend, your ex-wife, your bills, your taxes. the garbage you need to take out. You need to be focused.
Which is why I've had a couple of these clients, because they've said, look, I was in a crash and now I'm I'm a little hesitant and I'm thinking, and you can't have a light right foot when you're a race car driver.
You cannot have fear on traveling with you in those races,
Yeah.
Respect, but not fear.
And creating the right mental boundaries and putting yourself in the right mental space to be that guy that, when the helmet's on, when the gloves are on, that you get to be the asshole. Like, you have to be one.
Yeah. But, the same thing when you approach a therapy, you have to be focused. You have to look for the signs within the client. You have to observe the breathing. Am I going to accelerate with the hypnotizing process, with the deepening? Am I taking my foot a bit off? Hey, what's his color? What's his breathing? What's his temperature? What's his facial expressions?
Yeah.
His body. So you learn how to read the client, just like you learn to read a car when you're racing, Mm-hmm. So, and you need to be focused when you do therapy, because it's about the life of somebody who trusts you. With
that person on the chair or the couch across from you is just trusting you, right?
Yeah. So you need to be focused and dedicated to whatever you do. And I guess no matter what you do, if you do it, do 100% or don't do it at all.
Right. So jumping over to other stuff, you've got a lot going on that isn't seeing clients. I mean, obviously you see clients and you do that kind of work, but you're doing a lot of other stuff with like research and the school and all that. How do you prioritize your time? Like, in terms of like just percentages, how much time do you spend with client work versus the school versus other endeavors? How do you divide it up?
Well, I hold about 14 trainings that take 1 week, 7 days in a row, mm-hmm. in Switzerland and the US. And I hold single-day courses, 2-day courses, instant induction stuff. There's a lot of that. I hold presentations with doctors or organizations, and I hardly have time to do therapy. I do certain elite athletes or teams, and that's pretty much it. And also, obviously, within that realm or realm of the science project that we're doing, the science project is taking up a lot of time, especially when we're measuring people in the fMRI or the EEG. Then it takes up a lot of time, but we're 5 hypnotherapists who are doing this. But then I'm also running, obviously, all the OMNI International. We are present in Brazil, in China, in Korea, in Japan, in, oh my God, Italy, Netherlands, obviously the US, Canada, all over the place. It's like 26 countries.
Yep.
And last year alone, we graduated almost 1,500 students.
That's amazing. Like, that takes so much management, right? Like, even if you've got great people, there's still a lot to be mindful of.
Of course. And everybody has their own right to an ego. And one of the things I said, it cannot be about Hans. Hans' school of hypnosis or hypnotherapy, because nobody likes to be under somebody else's name.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a stroke of genius that Gerald Kein's school was not called Gerald Kein's School of Hypnotherapy, but it was called OMNI. And now, under the brand name of OMNI, every instructor that we have can have as much success as he wants.
Right.
And he can shine. He can be the star in his trainings, and he doesn't have to be under my name or anything. Obviously, somehow this thing comes together and everybody knows that I am the owner of the brand and everything worldwide, but I don't need to be everywhere. Let them do the work. Let them have all the success. Enjoy the light, the stage light that's upon them, and then they're happy. And obviously, it's balancing, Brazilian characters, Chinese characters, Russian characters, German characters, Swiss characters. But I grew up here in Switzerland. Then when I was 16, I moved to Brazil. When I was 19, I moved to the US. Later on, I moved to Germany. Then I moved to Turkey. So I'm used to managing different types of characters of people. and mentalities and cultural backgrounds. And I love that. Actually, it probably would be boring if I wouldn't have it. But
so thinking about this global brand and moving it, because obviously it was based in Florida and what, like DeLand or something like that.
Yeah.
And then moving the headquarters of this this institution, thousands and thousands of people have been trained by this institution, and the headquarters gets moved from fairly central Florida to Switzerland, right? Like does that geography change do anything to the institution, or does it change anything at all?
Yeah, obviously we have an incredible growth rate here in Europe, especially Switzerland, Germany, Netherlands, stuff like that. And we have, because the focus was more now in Switzerland, we have abandoned is maybe the wrong word, but we just didn't have enough resources available to maintain the business in the US.
Right.
So that has obviously slowed down quite a bit compared to what it used to be. But we just opened up our OMNI US office, and we've appointed a CEO.
Who's that? Can I?
You won't. His name. Let me describe him to him. He was my roommate in college.
Awesome.
Fraternity brother.
Okay.
And he was a business analyst for JP Morgan and companies like that.
Cool.
And he took the training, and we always stayed in touch over those years. And he took the training, and he was like, "That is so much more fun than what I've been doing in the last few years."
Right.
And so he brings the business sense. He brings the U.S. knowledge, the U.S. passport, and his network. And we're building up this U.S. presence again on a much, hopefully, bigger scale, obviously.
Yeah.
And it used to be, you will meet him at HypnoThoughts. He will be there.
I'm sure.
And, yeah.
Cool. So I have this memory that I don't think I've shared with you about the first time you and I spoke on the phone. And like from my American centric perspective, and I'm busy. I'm in my own world, and I'd never heard of you. And then all of a sudden I hear of you, and then all of a sudden you're taking over OMNI, and you're Jerry's right-hand guy. And then all of a sudden you have taken over OMNI, and you're still working with Jerry, and this huge rise in profile, right? And it, in a very short period of time, from my perspective, you went from I've never heard of you to, you're a major player in the global training world of hypnosis. And so I was like, okay, who is this guy? And obviously Jerry was, well connected with the NGH, and you were doing NGH stuff. And maybe around year 2 of HypnoThoughts Live, I was like, I'd love, Jerry and I had a great relationship, and Jerry and I had been talking about maybe getting him to come out. And I was like, maybe we get Hans to come out instead, and we'll see what all this is. And Melissa Tears gave us each other's phone numbers and said, you guys would really get along. You guys are, you guys are both laid back dudes. It'll be cool. And so you called me to talk about this. And I don't know if you know this. I was literally standing on the top of a very tall hill in the middle of Death Valley. And I was on a photography trip with my brother-in-law. He's a big photography as his hobby, and I like it a lot too. So if you had seen where I was, it looked like I was on the moon, just gravel and rocks for as far as you can see in every direction. And I'm just on this giant hill of gravel in the middle of an ocean of rocks. And there isn't anything alive as far as I can see in any direction except for my brother-in-law, who's on the bottom of this thing. And my phone rings in my pocket. And I pull it out, and it's a number that I don't recognize. And so I answer it, and it's you. And I was like, oh, I really want to take this call. And so I'm just standing, and we talked for half an hour. And so I'm just standing up there in 114, 118 degree heat in the middle of just this baking hot sun. And my brother-in-law is just looking at me, unwilling to climb the gravel rock hill to get to me, because I got up there to take a cool picture. And he was looking at me like, I'm not coming up there. and you just need to come down, get off the phone. And I was just so genuinely enjoying my first conversation with you that I stayed up there for way too long. So that's my first, like, that's how you and I met. And I was like, dude, you got to come to Hypnothoughts Live. And you're like, I'm interested, but there's a lot of moving parts. And, you know, with the OMNI transfer, I don't know if I can do it this time. I was like, get there. And you didn't that year. And then like the next year or the year after, we circled back around. You're like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to come. You came, and obviously we became fast friends because we're both laid back people. That just like Jerry, we don't take ourselves seriously. And now you're teaching you're doing a full OMNI certification in Vegas at Hypnothoughts Live. I don't think we've ever done any hypnosis certification training courses at Hypnothoughts Live. So we're excited that OMNI's the school doing it. So what's happening with that?
Well, 3 days prior to Hypnothoughts, the course starts. And then after Hypnothoughts, we have 4 days to finish the training. So it's a 7-day training. And I'm actually very honored to be able to offer it around the Hypnothoughts convention.
And this is just, it's the straight OMNI curriculum. There's no, like, you're not watering anything down or taking anything out. You're doing pure OMNI.
You get always 100%. And I mean, what do you get? You get the whole thing about regression, ultra height, Esdale state, and how to work with that, and instant inductions. You get so many life stories from past experiences of therapies that I've done. And I sincerely keep my fingers crossed that my book is going to be able to be published. I have 3 books published here in Switzerland, and 2 have been translated into English. And at least 1 should be able to make the market in this year.
Nice.
1 has been a bestseller here in Switzerland, actually. And you get all that. You get all the experience that I bring along, and we're basing it also obviously on Jerry's experience. Jerry will be there by video in quite a few video sequences. And it's the same training that's being taught in Brazil, in China, in Russia, in Switzerland. It's the very same training. And one of the main features, obviously, is it is ISO certified, which is the first, as far as I'm aware, the first training ever to be ISO certified. And it is evidence-based, because what we are doing is, with this hypnoscience project, is we're proving that what we're doing really does work on a scientific level. So we're
with the fMRIs and the EEGs, and you're doing all that work.
Obviously, we will give insights into the science of it. We are going to publish our first findings in a major magazine, maybe in May.
Cool.
And the goal is to prove that there is such a thing as a hypnotic state. And we seem to be able to prove not only 1, but 2 states.
Oh, wow.
The numbers that add up, but I first the scientists are here to prove that it's wrong, that it's not true.
Sure.
I'm here to prove that it is true. But the numbers are so solid. They have been calculated over and over again. It almost leaves no other conclusion. But obviously, it will take peer review to talk about it or to analyze it. So we have been around for 40 years. You get what Jerry has been teaching, and even more than that. We're celebrating 40 years of existence. We have a huge party going on in June in Switzerland.
Cool.
We're expecting 400 to 600 OMNIs to show from all over the world.
Cool.
And well, in September it will be, or in August it will be a little bit too late to join that party in June. But you see, we call it also the OMNI family. It's a growing family, and those students taking the class, they will join the OMNI family. There's more than there's the OMNI Finder, where you can register and where people who look for therapy can find you. We have the education platform, where there is dozens and dozens of videos of live regression to cause sessions for our students to watch them live. They can learn from the instructors. So there's a lot of after the class support that we give that
Yeah.
is fairly unique. So,
Yeah.
and obviously you get me if you like it or not, but I'll be the one teaching that.
It's funny because, you know, when we were talking with you, when Richard and I were talking with you about putting on the pre and post conference certification class,
Yeah.
you know, at first we were like, look, we can do like a 5-day or a 6-day. And you were really just like, it's a 7-day class. It's what it is. If we're calling it a certification, there's only one Omni certification, and it's this, and this is the way we do it. And,
Yeah.
you know, it required flexibility from Richard and I to do it, but, you know, we respect that. You know, obviously, you know, you saying, look, I'm going to have the integrity of, I'm not going to change my work for this opportunity. The work is worth making the changes for. And so we were happy to do it. You know, it took a little bit of, you know, managing some stuff, but
and I'm very happy. We already have people signed up.
Yeah, people are signing up.
Very happy. And those who signed up by February 28th, they had the ticket included to HypnoThoughts, by the way.
Yep.
Yep. So that was a special that we had running. And yes, I appreciate it. But see, cutting off a day of that training will be taking off part of the experience that you get taking the Omni training, and something would be missing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been really consistent with this, not just in the conversation with me, but like, you know, what I've seen even as you were like, I remember the video where Jerry announced that you guys were working together and that you were going to take over. And I remember watching this video, and ever since then, you know, I was like, okay, I got to pay attention to who this guy is, because I don't know who he is, but Jerry obviously thinks he's awesome. So, you know, I should probably do some homework. Everything I've seen of you has had that level of congruence, right? You're like, no, we're going to do things right. No, we're going to do things the right way. And you don't seem to be the kind of guy who's willing to cut corners.
Well, see, taking shortcuts is nothing wrong, but cutting corners is wrong. And
I like that, actually.
If you find a fast way to do something, do it, but not for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But always for the right reasons, but to the benefit of the client or the student. But cutting corners, as it's the saying in the US, it means you're cheating, basically. Yep. Taking a shortcut can sometimes be smart. Sure. But if you run 100 meters, there's no shortcut on 100 meters. You always have to run the 100 meters. But there's some things in life you can take a shortcut and still get the same result, and you're not cheating. And then there's cutting corners, and you know, if something is, I guess, cutting corners would be cutting down the course to 6 days and still charging the same amount of money,
right?
Or stuff like that, and that would be ethically not correct. And it's not about the money. It's definitely not about the money. Obviously, I have to live. I have to support my organization. In the meantime, we're, I think, 10 people who are scientists, who are doctors, who are PhDs, and you know those guys. And it cannot be about the money, because if it were about the money, the focus is in the wrong place.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you start making decisions because of money, and then all of a sudden it just runs in a bad direction.
No, and you know, I'm in the business just like you are.
Of course.
You're about hypnosis. Hypnosis first, and money is a consequence of the excellent work that you do.
Yeah.
And if it's about the money, it looks counterfeit. People will notice it. It's a shortcut. You're not in it for the right reasons. And if you're only in it for the money, people will notice, and sooner or later you're hurting our business, which is called hypnotherapy. That's my personal opinion.
Completely agree. So you are doing the 7-day Omni certification. If anybody's watching this and they're looking for either a new perspective on hypnosis, they've been trained before, or they've taken like a weekend class, but they want more training and all that. Really, I mean, the Omni certification is something that you know, no matter who you train with, you always want to get more training. We all do that. That's why we go to conferences. But one of the really great things about OMNI is it's so globally known that, you know, you can say, look, I'm certified by OMNI. I trained at OMNI. People can say, oh, that's awesome. That means, and they know how to have a conversation with you. So people who are relatively new or even have some experience, it's a great foundational course with a ton of content and 7 days of hypnosis training with this methodology is a really cool thing. So Hans, I want to say thank you for doing this and just taking some time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation so that people can get to know you. Race car driver, scientist, businessman, and not a self-important jerk, and a good person. I always like to give you the last word, you know, our guest the last word. So before we sign off, is there anything you just want to say to everybody who's watching?
Join HypnoThoughts. That's all I can say. I felt extremely welcome. In the beginning, I was not quite sure because I've always been at another conference, which I still value very highly. I just haven't been able to go there for the last 2 times because of scheduling issues. But I've been there for like 8 years in a row. And so I was not quite sure. And when I met you there in person, you approached me, you welcomed me with open arms. And that's the climate I have experienced, and that's the climate anybody will experience. And so if you're thinking about joining HypnoThoughts, if you take my training or not, just join HypnoThoughts. It's a great place to be. And Scott is a nice guy. And, you know, it's funny. He always pays beer to everybody. He keeps inviting. If you approach him and say, "Where's my beer?" he will always have a beer for you.
That's the reputation I would like to have. You know?
I just put you on display. No, but okay, let me put it this way. Here's a deal. Because we're celebrating 40 years of OMNI. Yep. It's a special thing. Yeah. And I would like to, because we're having a huge bash in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I will be sober by the time August comes around. So, but I'm inviting all those who want to be invited for a beer or a beverage that's within, you know, reasonable. And what's the best time? Saturday after the show, or
Saturday after the show? I think it's a perfect time.
Saturday after the show, I will make some tickets available. We will make a deal with that.
Yep.
Everybody gets at least one free drink at the Gator Bar or whatever, the Alligator Bar.
That's the one. The world famous Alligator Bar is going to host the American chapter of the OMNI 40th anniversary.
Exactly. We're going to party, and I'm going to invite everybody who wants to be invited to a drink and celebrate the 40 years and just, you know, chatting with each other.
So if you can't make it to Switzerland in May, don't worry. We'll meet you at the Alligator Bar after the stage show in Vegas. I love it.
That's a deal.
That's a deal. Hey, thanks for doing this. I'll see you in Vegas, and all of you guys, I'll see you on the next one of these interviews. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.